They told me I had paranoid delusions, that I was a danger to myself and others. But they were wrong. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't supposed to be here. And yet here I was, locked inside Fairfield Psychiatric Hospital, a place where screams never stopped, where people went missing, where I quickly learned the worst thing you could do was tell the truth. It started with a mistake. At least that's what I told myself at first. I had a run-of-the-mill life in Sycamore Hills, a nowhere town in Illinois. Worked as an auto mechanic. Lived alone. No wife, no kids, not much family to speak of. Just a normal guy. And maybe that's why nobody fought for me when they locked me up. The cops picked me up at home. Didn't even let me pack a bag. Just showed up at my door. Said my name was on a psychiatric hold order. I think you got the wrong guy. They didn't answer. Just tightened the cuffs. Tossed me in the back of a squad car. And took me straight to Fairfield. Fairfield Psychiatric was worse than I imagined. Not one of those clean, modern places you see in movies. This was old. Rotting. The hallways smelled like urine and bleach. The walls were cracked. The lights flickered. And the other patients, they weren't just mentally ill. They were lost. Gone. Some sat in chairs, rocking back and forth. Some muttered to themselves. Some just stared. Like their minds weren't there anymore. Like the place had eaten them alive. You don't belong here. That's what I told Dr. Evelyn Pike, the first psychiatrist they assigned me. A woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, gray hair pulled back tight. She barely looked up from my file. That's what they all say. I told her I was sane, that I was put here by mistake, that I didn't even know who signed the damn order. She smiled, but not in a way that made me feel safe. We'll evaluate you, Mr. Calloway. And if you truly don't belong here, she flipped the folder shut. You'll be free to go. That was 5 days ago. And since then, I had seen things I could never unsee. The first night, they put me in Ward C, the worst one. High security. No easy way out. Just for observation, they told me. Bullshit. The guy in the room next to mine, Denny. He never slept. Just pounded on the walls all night. Don't sleep, man, he hissed through the vent. They come at night. I told myself he was just crazy. That's what people in here were, right? But then, around 2 a.m., I woke up. Not to Denny. To something else. Something outside my room. I held my breath. Listened. Soft footsteps. Not the guards. Too light. Too careful. Then, the doorknob rattled. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wasn't restrained. I could move. But where the hell was I gonna go? The door was locked from the outside. I stared at the handle, watched it turn, just slightly, like someone was testing the lock. Then, a whisper, right against the door. You're new. I didn't answer, didn't breathe. The voice was low, hollow, like it was coming from someone who hadn't spoken in a long time, or wasn't used to speaking at all. Then, a single knock, slow, deliberate, bang, then nothing. Silence. I didn't sleep, and in the morning I wasn't sure if it even happened, until I noticed something strange. The lock on my door wasn't the same. The tiny screws were different, like someone had taken the whole thing apart and put it back together, like someone had been inside my room while I slept. The second night, I tried to stay awake, tried to listen for anything unusual, but by 3 a.m., exhaustion won. I drifted off. And when I woke up, I was somewhere else. I wasn't in my bed. I was standing in the middle of the hallway. No shoes. No idea how I got there. The doors to the other rooms were closed. Except one. The door at the end of the hall. Slightly open. A soft light spilling out. Like it was waiting for me. I should have gone back to my room. I should have banged on the doors for help. But I didn't. I stepped forward. And peeked inside. The room was empty, just a single chair, and something written on the wall, scratched into the paint, like someone had carved it in with their fingernails. 6 words. You were never supposed to leave. I staggered back, ran to my room, slammed the door shut. I didn't sleep again that night, but I knew one thing. I had to get the hell out of Fairfield. because I wasn't imagining things. And the longer I stayed here, the worse it was going to get. I stopped sleeping. It wasn't safe. Not after the first 2 nights. Not after I woke up somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Not after I realized someone had been in my room. By day 3, I started watching the others, trying to figure out who was normal and who wasn't. There weren't many options. Most of the patients in Ward C weren't just unstable. They were completely gone. Eyes vacant. Mouths moving without making sound. Some of them had deep scars on their heads, like something had been cut out. Some just sat there, rocking back and forth. And then there were the ones who whispered. There was a guy named Henry, mid-50s, thin, always muttering. Every time I walked by, I caught bits and pieces. They keep us quiet. Not supposed to talk about it. Some of them aren't even patients. That last part stuck with me. I thought he was just rambling nonsense. Until I noticed the guards. The ones in blue scrubs? Normal staff. Orderlies. They were strict but human. The ones in white? Different. They never spoke. Never looked tired. Never reacted to anything. They just stood in the hallways watching. And some of them looked familiar. Like I had seen them somewhere else. Not just here. Not just in Fairfield. But before. In my life. On the streets. At the grocery store. Like they had been watching me long before I got here. By day 5, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out. I needed to find someone who could help me. That's when I met Elias. Elias was young. Maybe 22. Shaved head. Deep dark circles under his eyes. Didn't talk much. Just stared at the door like he was waiting for something. But when I sat next to him in the cafeteria, he finally spoke. "You think you're getting out?" I hesitated. "I don't belong here." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Yeah, that's what they all say at first." "What do you mean?" I asked. Elias lowered his voice. "They bring people here on purpose. Not the real patients, the ones like you. And once you're in, you don't leave." A chill ran down my spine. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "People leave all the time." Elias just stared at me, then leaned forward. "Have you seen anyone leave?" I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I hadn't. I had seen patients disappear, but not leave. Before I could ask more, a white uniformed orderly stepped closer, not looking at Elias, looking right at me. Elias stood up fast. "You talk too much," he muttered, and then he walked away, like he already knew what was coming next. That night they came for me. It was past midnight. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Then, I heard the click of my door unlocking. The handle turned. The door eased open. 2 orderlies in white stepped inside. I sat up fast. "What's going on?" No answer. They just grabbed my arms. Cold hands. Too strong. Too controlled. I fought, but it was like trying to move stone. I was dragged into the hallway, down past the sleeping patients, past the guards, past everything normal, toward a door I had never seen before. A door with no sign, no window, just a keypad. One of the orderlies punched in a code. The door slid open. Inside was an elevator. I kicked harder, tried to break free. "Where are you taking me?" They didn't answer. They never did. The elevator descended. Farther than the first floor. Farther than the basement. The walls shook slightly, like the place had been built deep underground. Then, the doors opened, and I finally understood why no one ever left Fairfield. I was looking into a surgical room. Clean. Sterile. Too clean. And lined with beds. Beds with straps. Beds with patients. People I had seen upstairs. People who had gone missing. Lying perfectly still. Eyes open. Mouths open. Not moving. Not breathing. Like their bodies were still there. But their minds weren't. I thrashed. Screamed. A third figure stepped forward. Not an orderly. Not a doctor. Someone worse. Someone I had seen before. Dr. Evelyn Pike. She smiled. "You're ready now, Mr. Calloway." And then, everything went black. The last thing I remembered was Dr. Pike's smile. Then, Nothing. No dreams. No sense of time. Just darkness. I woke up strapped to a metal table. Arms locked down. Legs immobilized. Bright surgical lights burned above me. The air was sterile, chemical, wrong. I tried to move. Tried to scream. Something cold and thick was stuck in my throat. A tube. I started choking. Panicking. Relax, Mr. Calloway. Dr. Pike's voice. Soft. Amused. She stepped into view. Wearing a pale surgical gown. Gloves slick with something dark. Behind her, the room stretched deep. Row after row of patients strapped down. Eyes wide open, glassy, unblinking. Some were convulsing. Some just lay still. All of them were connected to machines that hummed softly. Monitors flashing erratic brain waves. And above them, a massive screen, flickering with images. I tried to speak. The tube in my throat stopped me. Dr. Pike placed a hand on my head. Her fingers were too cold, like she had been handling something dead. You're the perfect candidate, you know? She smiled. We don't take just anyone. A sharp beep from the machine next to me. The screen overhead flickered. A video feed came into focus. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. A room, dimly lit. A table. 2 chairs. A man sitting across from a figure in the dark. Something about it felt familiar. Then, my stomach dropped. It was me. It's from earlier today, Pike said. Your session with Elias. Remember? I shook my head. I had never been in that room. I had never had a session. But there I was, talking, nodding, moving, like it had actually happened, like they had created a memory I didn't live. The screen flickered again. Another video, different time, different place. It showed me at home, working on my car, drinking a beer, listening to the radio, perfectly normal. Except, I knew for a fact that never happened. I never worked on my car that day. I never owned that radio. I never had that scar on my arm. This is what we do here, Pike said, stepping closer. We extract experiences. She gestured to the rows of patients. We pull the strongest moments from a person's mind, reshape them, store them, and sometimes replace them. She traced a finger along the scar on my forehead. I shuddered, because I hadn't had a scar before. Not until now. Why? I choked out. She smiled. Memory is power, Mr. Calloway. And yours is very valuable. The machines clicked, hummed. The monitors flickered. I could feel something happening. A deep pressure behind my eyes. Something pulling at my thoughts. Like a hand reaching into my brain. A low, whispering sound filled my ears. Not from the room. From inside my own head. And then, I felt it. Piece of myself. Being peeled away. We don't need all of you, Pike said softly. Just the best parts. I fought against the straps. My head spun. The images on the screen shifted again. More memories I never lived. Scenes of places I'd never been. People I'd never met. And one face, the tall man in white, watching me, standing in the background. In every single memory, the machine whined. The pressure intensified. My vision darkened. And suddenly, I was somewhere else. A small apartment. Lights dim. A woman sat on a couch. I recognized her. But I didn't know from where. She turned to me, smiled. Long day at work? She asked. Her voice was warm, familiar. I tried to answer, but I didn't know her name. Didn't know who I was supposed to be. I staggered back, looked at my hands. They weren't mine. Different scars. A wedding ring I had never worn. My reflection in the mirror. A face I didn't recognize. But deep inside, I felt it. A memory I had never lived. Trying to replace the real ones. Trying to make me forget. I screamed. The room ripped apart. Everything rushed backward. The machine shorted out. The straps snapped free. I collapsed to the floor, gasping. I was back. Back in Fairfield. Dr. Pike staggered back, startled. The screen overhead flickered violently. Error messages flashing in red. The other patients started shaking. Eyes wide. Mouths opening in soundless screams. like their stolen memories were fighting to return, like the system was breaking. Get him sedated, Pike snapped. The orderlies rushed forward. I bolted. I didn't think. Didn't plan. I ran, dodging past the gurneys, past the patients who were finally waking up. I tore through the door, down the hallway, to the elevator. I punched the button over and over. Behind me, footsteps pounded. They were coming. But I wasn't staying. The elevator doors slid open. I lunged inside, hammered the up button. The doors shut, and I left hell behind. The elevator climbed. The lights flickered. My hands shook. I was alive, but something was missing. I could feel it, like a gap in my thoughts, like they had still taken something. And whatever it was, I was never getting it back. The elevator doors slid open. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. I was back on the main floor of Fairfield. But something was wrong. The lights were dimmer than before. The hallways felt emptier, like the hospital was already erasing me, like I was a patient who had never existed. I had to move, had to get out. I forced myself forward, my legs shaking. Ahead, the security station. Past that, the exit. I could see the doors. So close. Then, a voice. Going somewhere, Mr. Calloway? Dr. Pike, standing just ahead, blocking the way. Her hands were calmly folded, her white coat perfectly clean, like she hadn't just tried to erase me from existence. Stay back, I warned. I checked the hallway. No guards, no orderlies, just her, standing between me and freedom. You were doing so well, she sighed. Most patients don't make it this far. I took a slow step forward. I'm not your patient, she smiled. Aren't you? Something buzzed in my skull. A deep pressure, like my mind was splitting open, like they were still inside me, still taking something. I gritted my teeth. Get out of my head. We never left, Mr. Calloway. She tilted her head. That's the part you don't understand. You think you're escaping, but... Her smile widened. What if you already did? A deep sense of wrongness filled me. My thoughts were fractured. I couldn't trust my own memories. What if I had been here before? What if I had already escaped and they brought me back? What if this was happening over and over? No, I wasn't falling for it. I clenched my fists. You can't keep me here. She didn't move, didn't react. Then, she stepped aside, gestured toward the exit. Go then. My chest tightened. It was too easy. I hesitated. Why are you letting me go? Dr. Pike gave me a knowing look. Because you'll come back. The buzzing in my skull sharpened, like something was tearing loose inside me, like I was forgetting something important. I didn't wait. I ran. Through the security station, past the last set of doors. And then, I was outside. The cold hit me hard. The parking lot was empty. No police cars. No ambulances. Just my own reflection in the glass doors. I looked pale. Wrong. Like I was still half-trapped inside. I forced myself forward. One step. Then another. Then, my phone buzzed. I froze. I had forgotten I even had it. Forgotten I ever owned one. Hands shaking, I pulled it out. One new message. From an unknown number. 2 words. Go home. I looked back at the hospital. The doors were still open. Dr. Pike was gone. No one was chasing me. No one was stopping me. And that's when I realized Fairfield never needed locks. Because whatever they did to me, it made sure I'd never really leave. I drove home in silence. No radio. No distractions. Just the hum of the engine and the empty roads stretching ahead. Everything felt off. The streetlights seemed too dim. The turns in the road felt longer, unfamiliar, like I was going home to a place I wasn't supposed to be. But when I pulled into my driveway, it was my house. Same faded green siding, same oil stain on the driveway. It was all exactly as I left it, except it didn't feel like mine. I stepped inside. The air was stale, like no one had been here for weeks. My hands trembled as I set my keys down. I walked through the rooms, flipping on lights. Everything was in place. The photos on the wall, the jacket draped over the chair, my boots by the door. But something was missing, something I couldn't name, like a gap in my mind. Then, I noticed my answering machine, the red light blinking. I hesitated. I never got messages. Not since my brother passed last year. Not since I stopped talking to people. With a deep breath, I pressed play. Mr. Calloway, this is Officer Grayson from the Sycamore Hills PD. We received a request from Fairfield Psychiatric regarding your status. Please return our call as soon as possible. Click. Next message. Mr. Calloway, this is your employer at Clark's Auto. You haven't shown up for work in 2 weeks. Let us know if you're okay. Click. Next message. Mr. Calloway, this is Dr. Evelyn Pike. You should come back. We need to discuss your condition. I froze. The message was from today. How did she know I was here? How did she know I was listening? I felt sick. Like Fairfield was still watching me. Like they had let me go for a reason. I grabbed my phone. Searched for Fairfield Psychiatric. And what I found made my stomach drop. It wasn't real. No official records. No state funding. No patient reviews. The building existed, but as an abandoned hospital. Shut down over 30 years ago. There was no Dr. Evelyn Pike. No staff. No admissions. Nothing. Like Fairfield had never existed at all. But I knew it did. I had been there. They had done something to me. And now, I didn't know what was real anymore. I looked down at my hands. Turned them over. There was a small scar on my forehead. Right where the electrodes had been. My pulse hammered. I stumbled to the mirror. And that's when I saw it. A tiny bandage on my temple. Like I had just been treated for something. Something invasive. Something I couldn't remember. My phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. 2 words. Check your pocket. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled as I reached into my jacket pocket. And pulled out a hospital bracelet. With my name on it. Date of discharge. Today. The hospital that issued it. Fairfield Psychiatric. I dropped the bracelet like it burned me. My heart slammed in my chest. I grabbed my keys. I had to leave. Now. I yanked the front door open. And stopped cold. A black car sat across the street. Engine running. Headlights off. A silhouette sat in the driver's seat. Watching. Waiting. Like they were making sure I understood. Like they were giving me a choice. I stepped back. Shut the door. Locked it. My breath came in gasps. I was out. I was home. But Fairfield wasn't done with me. They wanted me to know that. They wanted me to know that wherever I went, they'd always be watching. I backed away from the door. Sat down at the kitchen table. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to remember what they did to me. Tried to recall what they took. But my mind was a blur. Memories missing. Thoughts I couldn't piece together. Like something had been cut out. Like part of me was still back there. The answering machine beeped again. Another new message. I reached out, hesitated, then pressed play. A voice filled the room. Soft. Familiar. Jack, come back. You're not done yet. Click.